Tánaiste, and thank you for outlining the work. Can I just follow up with two questions specifically on what you've discussed there? You've outlined the reforms around workers' rights and changing the workers' agenda generally. Could you outline what you think the impact on gender equality is going to be from some of those reforms, some of those changes? And secondly, there on the previous page of your statement, you were talking about the barriers. You know, it's not simply a lack of opportunity at senior levels, but barriers at lower levels that are unlikely to be resolved at mandatory board quotas. And of course, it's a difficulty as well at executive level, not just board level, trying to get women to senior positions at executive level. One of the things that we've referenced here before, discussed before, is the phenomenon of women in commercial organisations in particular taking flexible leave, possibly after a second child, you know, a 3-day week or so on, but their partner remaining at a 5-day week, and the cultural effect of that being very different in commercial organisations in particular, and how we can get to a normalisation of a man coming into a commercial organisation and saying, we've just had a second baby, I'd like to do a 4-day week for the next 3 years, and that becoming a cultural norm. We've introduced legislation on the gender pay gap and reporting of that. Is it possible, do you think, to go down a line where we could report on parents taking flexible situations, flexible leave, you know what I mean, for parents of young children? Anyway, it's just something we've discussed, but I have only a short time, so I'd love your views on the other pieces.
Tánaiste?
Yeah, thanks very much. In terms of the impact on the reforms that we're making in the workers' rights area, you know, I do think the move to a living wage, the introduction of sick pay, and the introduction of auto-enrolment, every worker having a pension fund to top up their state pension, and that this will all be the reality by 2024, which isn't that far away, will help with gender equality. It's a generalisation, it's a broad statement, but generally women tend to be in lower paid jobs, are less likely to have their own pension fund, and I think that will help. It'll be a long-term thing happening, but certainly I think by the time we retire, most of us here are on the younger side of 50, pretty much everyone will have every worker anyway will have a occupational pension in addition to their state pension. And that'll be their individual pension right. There won't be a qualified adult or a dependent in the way a lot of retired women are now. So I think that'll be important. In terms of the barriers to women getting to leadership positions and getting onto company boards, I think it probably is down to a degree of promotion bias. That if you look at a lot of organisations, and the public service is one example, you'll see a lot of women up to a certain point, and then when you get to the highest tier, if you like, there are fewer, and there's lots of reasons for that, but that's a problem. And one thing we want to avoid happening is putting in place a set of quotas, but it's the same people who turn up all the time on the boards, and that happens with men, by the way, as well as women, but we don't want it to happen generally. So you kind of need a stream of people who are getting promoted, and I think there is promotion bias in business at the moment for lots of reasons, but that needs to change. And also return, if somebody takes time off as a mother to raise their family, and that's more likely to be a woman than a man. When they come back to the workplace, they've kind of lost 4 or 5 years of promotion and experience and so on, and we need to account for that in some way, in my view, particularly because we want people to return and we need them to return. Just finally, on your question about whether we could oblige companies to collect more information and report it, the short answer is yes, but I do think we need to always have regard to the number of information obligations we impose on companies. That's fine for a big company when they have a HR department and it's just something that someone in the HR department does. For a small company, all these regulations, filling in all these forms, making all these reports, and potentially being fined, prosecuted or shamed for not doing so is a real cost. And we have to bear that in mind when we impose it on small companies that don't have a dedicated HR function.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Deputy, would you like to have any follow-up, because you have a little more time?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to ask about, because obviously one of this is in the stream of the public life and politics as well, and obviously you're here as party leader. What you know, and it's something we've covered in many different ways. You know, what's your own view about women in public life more broadly and the barriers that they're facing?
Yeah, well, I think people face all sorts of barriers depending on their circumstances. You know, there's socioeconomic barriers as well. There's barriers relating to race and membership of other minorities. So I do think we need to see things in the round. For our own party, as you know, 3 of our 7 cabinet ministers are female. We have 66 female councillors, which is more than any other party, and we have more female MEPs than any other party. But to say we're anywhere near close to achieving parity, particularly in the Oireachtas, is not the case. It was the Fine Gael Minister, Phil Hogan, that introduced the gender quota legislation. So I don't see it as an obligation being imposed on it. I see it as something that we want to do, and we're going to do that for the next election, and hopefully we'll see a significant increase in the number of female and TDs and senators in the next Oireachtas. Senate, much more balanced than it all, as you know, but again, lots of different reasons.
So you don't suffer for promotion bias yourself, which is very good to hear.
No, I'd love to have more people to promote, but working on that.
Very good. Thank you, Tánaiste.
Thanks, Deputy. I have Deputy Sorkin.